Well, maybe in English or French. Let's do it in English. Okay. Doing this kind of thing is really not easy, right? I mean, hybrid meeting, etc. But luckily we have some hackers around, so we hacked the solution around the transmitting the video. Sorry for the poor quality. Next iteration will do better, okay, in this. So let me sum up where we are up to now here. So we have heard this morning about the institutional support of the project we are working all together about. Then we have looked into the relevance of what we are trying to do for open science. Then we had a section on the preservation of our digital heritage, in particular our software heritage. Now the time has come to listen to people from industry and people from the public administration about the relevance of software and software source code, and if they want to share with us also some words about why they find it relevant to support an initiative like Software Heritage today. So it's a big pleasure that I invite you to join on stage Jean-Sébastien Goetschy from Société Générale and Keith Bergelt from the Open Invention Network. Okay. Yeah. Yes, yes. Okay. And so, and luckily this session will be without videos or movies or slides, so it should work. Let's see if this happens, okay? So maybe we can start from the person who actually made the longest trip to come and participate in this event. So Keith, would you mind sharing with us a little bit about what the Open Invention Network does, what your work is, why software relevance, and why becoming a sponsor for Software Heritage, what you think about what we are trying to do?
Sure. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk about innovation, which is one of the keys to kind of a theme that runs through my entire professional existence. I'll talk a little bit just briefly. Open Invention Network is the largest cross-license community in the history of technology. It enables adoption and of open source code without concern for being held up or having to pay rents to patent holders. And so essentially it buys into the general notion that where we collaborate, where we build on each other's ideas, where we innovate through software, that we shouldn't have to worry about litigation in all other environments outside of the scope of core functionality of open source code and open source projects, of which there are literally thousands, that we should be involved in supporting the notion of freedom of action and freedom to operate. Because essential and core to the notion of innovation within software is the idea of building on each other's ideas. 30 years and 4 weeks ago, Linus Torvalds sent an email out that evidenced that this is really a social movement. And I think not enough is made of this. We produce technology through collaborative development. And in that collaborative development, that modality of bringing people together, smart people together from all around the world, irrespective of race, creed, orientation, nationality, form of government under which one operates in a given country, we're creating a barrierless system for collaboration and development, which allows people to be able to be involved in this cycle of innovation. And it's really, it ties into a notion that was raised in the 90s. There are a number of books written and Harvard Business Review articles that talked about innovation is really coming about through this new idea, which came from game theory, called co-opetition. The idea that we cooperate to compete more effectively. Nowhere is that more prevalent and and significantly presented than in the open source community. And what led up to that were joint ventures and kind of collaborative programs ushered in by governments or by individual universities. But those were all preliminary and showed us the potential of where we could ultimately get to if we actually opened up the barriers to communication and the barriers to participation in next generation innovation. And so 1 + 1 + 1 no longer equals 3, it equals 6 or 10 or 20 when we bring smart people together to distill the collective intelligence of a community of people focused on solving problems through software. And I talk about software, but at the same time, in very much the forefront of my mind, I think about hardware. If we think about RISC-V, which essentially will free us up as a culture globally to innovate in hardware. The hardware innovation only occurs because of the software that has now reached a significant level of maturity to allow us to do hardware, software co-design and simulation, and then design the chips that we need, not the chips that are made generically to support that we'd previously have to build around. And it's a very significant change that's occurring, but it's really enabled fundamentally by software. And this is a community that's about inclusivity, that's about the notions that come out of living system theory, requisite variety and complex adaptation. We're coming together to be able to think collectively, to think with each other rather than against each other. The whole idea of competitive positioning of organizations against each other, yeah, we can still compete and we need to compete and find differentiation, but we don't need to do it in the way that we've historically done it. And this is one of the truly seductive elements of open source, is that it defies any kind of control elements. While the US famously is having lots of issues with China right now, those issues are standing water. The reality is that we have never seen the kind of growth that over the last 7 years that we've seen in terms of China's participation and adoption of open source code and participation in open source projects. This is a wonderful, welcoming trend. We like to see this because what it means is we're not losing the incredible creativity and talent and intelligence that comes from the incredibly successful educational programs that have been put in place over the last 20 years in China to be able to yield a level of middle-class growth that the likes of which we've never seen in the rest of the world. These are all important components that tie back to the fact that software is becoming so incredibly important. And I think what happens with the world is that we have people that start to look at what's happened, and they start to understand that inventing in silos is not the future. That's the past. What we're doing now is finding more and more opportunities to collaborate and fewer opportunities for our differences to divide us to the point where we work contra to the whole goal of innovation and really optimization of human potential. If we're not here to collaborate, build on each other's ideas, and learn through humility, and do as Linus kind of instructed and showed us by putting something out on the web that said, look, this may not be so great, it's not a finished product, but those of you who want to build on this and add to it, we welcome you doing that. And Linus is no shrinking violet and not known for being the most humble person in the world, but in fact, this was a brilliant stroke, because he recognized that his core, that it would take other minds, other ideas, and other perspectives to be able to create something better that he could develop on his own. And I think we carry that forward now in a culture that is innovating through projects. Project-based innovation is essentially the model that we're utilizing in software and in hardware to be able to create new novelty. It's transforming the way that we innovate as a culture, as nation states, and as a broad-scale society. And we came to software heritage because if it didn't exist, we would have to create it. Because what we do is define the scope of the cross license in which thousands of companies are now participating, recognizing that, again, that notion of where we compete, and that's where our differentiation is. But where we collaborate, we need to be all in. We need to collaborate with each other and put down our patents, put them aside in favor of this higher level of innovation that we're able to get through humility-based collaborative development. And so, again, it's important that this project-based innovation is an irreversible trend because it comes from social movement. And this social movement, it's not about disintermediating one technology in favor of another technology. This social movement just happens to produce technology, but the really critical component and the thing that attracted me to taking on this role and being a steward, a guardian of open source collaboration is the notion that that what we are doing is much bigger than ourselves. That when we do bring people together to work creatively, we're getting to a place that we could not otherwise get to. And it's largely because this is such a powerful movement, this modality of collaborative development. And so we came to Software Heritage for a number of reasons. One is that because we have thousands of elements of code that create the scope of patent non-aggression across the broader global community of companies active in software development, we need a permanent record of every bit of code, because that code defines the scope of functionality of this cross-license obligation that thousands of companies have bought into. And it's important to note that in the prehistory of project-based innovation, we had many, many important developments that were put out on listservs and other environments where we now, because of Software Heritage, all of that content has been gathered and accumulated. We think about the world today, and it was so different 35 years ago, 40 years ago, when open source had its foundations with GNU Linux. And so this collaboration, this notion of bringing these of this content together allows us to be able to point to Software Heritage and work collaboratively to link our website for anyone who's interested in understanding what functionality and thereby what patents are obligated under the cross license. They need to have this repository. And I think it's very much for us, it's a living resource. I think when people look at it and you talk about concepts like library and kind of a storage depository, it's very misleading because this is so much more powerful. This isn't a static activity. This is something that's living. It's capturing the past and growing the opportunity for the future. In addition, when Roberto first approached me to tell me he was doing this 5 years ago, I think we were at an event in Barcelona, and the first thing I thought of is my dream or vision as someone who wants to limit the negative effect of what can be a very innovative process, which is patenting. What I wanted to do and still want to do and have the hope of doing at some point is to utilize the repository that Software Heritage represents and be able to make it searchable so that we can utilize it as a form of prior art. And that way, all of the poor quality patents that we've unfortunately, because of timing, lack of awareness, lack of information, lack of databases, we were not able to have software serve as an important element of prior art. But all of the creativity and innovativeness captured in software is something that one day, I hope with the support of some of the companies that are represented on the Software Heritage Board, such as Google, Microsoft, Huawei, and others, can come together to be able to solve the problem of making code searchable so that we can eliminate the tax and the rent that has to be paid to companies for patents that should have never been granted. And this is not a a criticism of the patent system. The patent system is what it is. People do the best and work as hard as they possibly can to be able to support the patenting process. The reality is we can do more to be able to inform the perspective of the individuals who are charged with that responsibility if we can tap into resources like software heritage. And so for us, again, it's not an option. It's an imperative to be working with software heritage to ensure that the legacy of the past is maintained and the future is protected.
Thanks a lot, Keith. These as you probably know already, these are words that go directly to my heart and to the heart of the team who is working on this particular undertaking. Thanks a lot for your support. Now, Jean-Sébastien, I'm turning to you. Feel free to speak any language you want. There are direct translation. We are very happy to have Société Générale with us since the very beginning. And I mean, the floor is yours to say why you are here and what Société Générale is doing in general about software and open source.
Thank you, Roberto, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So I will maybe took my natural language for the rest of my speech. That is French. Donc, je suis le CIO.
I'm CIO of Société Générale, and the question that Roberto asked is relevant. Why is our bank involved in software heritage? In fact, what we find in software heritage is something which is perfectly natural because it has all our codes. First of all, I'd just like to say that Société Générale is completely involved, particularly concerning our social environmental responsibility. We want to reduce CO2, and also for IT, we are very committed. We wish to reduce our CO2 emissions, and our aim is to halve the CO2 emissions by 2025. So this is very soon, and so you can imagine that we have a lot to do. The second point is that the banking sector has a high intensive use of software and computers. We spend 2 billion a year in Société Générale for creating her codes and for developing programs. Of course, all of this is used by our teams, and therefore we have a team of coders and programmers working on this on a daily basis. We have approximately 5,000 IT staff in Société Générale. In 2017, we adopted a policy which is called Open Source First, and the aim was to migrate at least half our databases. And here, once again, we're talking about 4,000 projects or instances that were actually migrated onto an open source platform. And the idea is to, first of all, attract new and better experts. The best today are working on open source, which is innovative and has the best technology. So obviously we want to do that. We are also contributing to some of the projects that we have developed. And for us, this is also a question of transparency and traceability, which is very important because this is a sign of the way in which people place their trust in us, regulators, our clients, and so on and so forth. This is going to develop in the years ahead. And this is why we support software heritage, which corresponds to our DNA, which is the whole idea of open innovation, of digitalization, and preserving our environment and our society. Our motto is "The future is you." And I think we can say that here, the investment that we're making in innovation is to support the society of tomorrow as well. So that was a brief introduction into what Société Générale does. Thank you very much, Jean-Sébastien. Let me just say a few words as well, because what you've heard are very strong messages from some of our industrial partners. There are some who are here from Microsoft and from other industries that are here. You can see we have Huawei representatives as well who are here from China. So you can see that we do have an impact worldwide. It's not limited to Europe or to just one part of the world. We also have new people, Accor, for example, which is a company that I feel strongly about. It was one of the early companies that developed an economic model based entirely on open source software. We have CEA here, which is the Center for Atomic Energy. We have many industrial partners here. So we didn't have enough place to give everybody the floor because we have very little time. We have 3 hours. We can't have a coffee break because of COVID, and it's pretty intense. But I think these two messages that you've heard, I think do indicate how important what we're doing is doing. It's not just, as our colleague said, just a question of being a library. It's not a library. It's we've used the image of Alexandria, but people said, you know, Alexandria burnt down. Yes, it did. But there are two things to that. It burnt after having done a whole lot of things which were extremely important. And the reason how we chose Alexandria was about what it actually did before burning down. It went all over the world. It sent scientists all over the place to bring back manuscripts, to bring back the knowledge from other parts of the world. And that's exactly what we're doing. We skirt the world, we go all over the place, and we try to bring back. Now, obviously, we've got to protect it from burning. And to protect ourselves, we've made lots and lots of copies all over the place, these mirrors that I talked about earlier on. And so that's one way of preserving us and protecting us from a great fire. Anyway, so these were our industrial partners, but we also have people who are in public administrations who have played a very important role as well and been close to us. But before our two colleagues step down from the rostrum, I'd just like to ask them how to react to some recent events. You know that there are critical infrastructures that we use all the time. There's a very popular platform called GitHub, which stopped working a few days ago for a few hours. There was a fault. And so this meant that for a few hours, there was a breakdown. So my question is the following. How do you see the future platforms or ways of working so that we can actually protect ourselves against a sort of centralized infrastructure so that we don't actually have this problem for you? Well, this risk of concentration is, of course, a very major risk. And this is generally the case, whatever infrastructure you're dealing with, whether you're dealing with IT or if you're at a company level or at a national level. Of course, this is a vital issue where you've got to protect ourselves from these risks. In banks, risks are regulated. We have very clear obligations about spreading out the risk, about concentration, about suppliers, and this once again brings us back to what I was saying earlier on about open source. Open source is a way of diluting the concentration or the risk that we talked about earlier on. And our own infrastructures have also got to be protected. There is a certain amount of redundancy that has to be looked at carefully and protected. Yeah, the question was very simple. I mean, you have seen,
Let me say very clearly, okay? GitHub is a beautiful infrastructure, and I am the last one to tell they did a lousy job just because they had a 2 hours, 4 hour shutdown, okay? We know how difficult it is to run infrastructures. It is very complicated, so far from my mind the idea of criticizing here. I'm just pointing to the fact that we are really growing dependent on single infrastructure that can become single point of failure. So I wonder just what your thinking is about this kind of situation, which is natural. When you have network effect in computing, so you tend to have a single infrastructure that becomes dominant, but then you have a single point of failure. What can we do about that?
To me, it's a kind of a design flaw because you need redundant functionality in systems. If you don't have that, then you risk loss of data, you risk loss of access. And we just live in a society where that's untenable. And so vulnerability is something that I think can be designed around so that you don't suffer these kinds of situations. So I would say that it's a growing pain for a system that was probably never designed to be able to handle as much content as it actually deals with now.
Thanks a lot. The reason why I was raising this point is that this is a main concern for us too in software architecture. So we are trying to build a common shared infrastructure for everybody, but we are very well aware that our system can go down, our data center can go on fire, we can be hacked, data can be lost. That's the reason we are trying to build this network of mirror around the world, exactly because we know the fragility of the digital infrastructure you already rely upon. But this is a long-term operation. So we need more people to join, to come on board, to work with us, to build mirrors, to build new copies, to have more copies of this digital heritage around in such a way that no single failure can endanger our digital legacy. Well, so thanks a lot for being on this panel now. We would like to move forward to the public administration point of view. And for this, I'm inviting Leonardo Favario and Bastien Guéry to join me on the stage.